and welcome to Logan Sounds Off, where I talk about books, music, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Logan Kelly. Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I am doing an amazing interview with Cormac Battle. How are you, Cormac?
I'm very well. All the better for talking to you, Logan.
Thank you. That's really, really nice. So Cormac, for those who don't know about you and what you do, and who haven't listened to radio in a good long time and who are living under a rock, please let us know about what you've been doing in the past couple of years and what you've done.
Well, I work in radio now. I work as a researcher. I work as a presenter on radio in Wilt 2FM, and I work with Jennifer Zamparelli, and I have my own alternative music program as well. And before that, before I ever came to RT, I spent 13 years playing in two bands, really. One called Kerbdog and another one called Wilt. So from the age of 19, I'd say, up to 32, I was a professional. That's what I did with my life. I played in a band, and that brings me up to where I am now.
It's actually a very interesting story, guys. So please, even if you want more information after this, please look up about Cormac, because he's got some very interesting stories, which we're going to talk about during this interview. But first of all, I want to ask that I read that you started playing guitar after watching Back to the Future. What age were you when you got inspired to learn guitar?
I suppose I was 14. Well, Back to the Future came out when I was 14, which is 1987. And Back to the Future, when Marty McFly gets up on stage and he starts playing Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. And I just saw the power and the effect that had on me was just unbelievable. It just went in so deep. And because, all the girls like Marty McFly, and he was just so popular and he was so cool in that film as well. And I was at a very impressionable age at 14. So I got my parents to pestered them to get me an acoustic guitar, and that's where it kind of started for me, really. I wanted to be Marty McFly. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to inhabit and embody what he did to some degree, and so that's where that journey started for me.
That's actually a very interesting story, and I've never quite heard a story like it. So then, when you played guitar, did you want to set out as just playing it for fun, or did you really think that you wanted to be in a band and take over the world with your band, with your guitar?
No, it was more just something to mess around with. The taking over the world with a band thing didn't come in for a few more years. What happened was, where I'm from in Kilkenny had in the early 90s, it had a very rich music scene, and there was a lot of people. We were all into bands. We were all in each other's bands. We were all into listening to music all the time. It was kind of vocational for us. It wasn't sport. It was all about music. And it was at that point that we started playing. I was in a band with a bunch of guys, a bunch of friends, and we started playing our own songs. And then we eventually went on to make a demo tape, which is what people did back then. And you'd send them off to record labels and they'd generally ignore you and you'd never hear from them again. But when we sent ours off, we started hearing back from all these record companies saying they wanted to see us, and where could we see you playing? And they all flew over to see us playing in Kilkenny, actually, at a pub called the Pump House. And the following day we were offered a record deal by what's now Universal Records, Mercury Records at the time, and flew us over to London, signed a record deal, and started making records and albums and all that kind of stuff. And that's how it all started, really.
That's really, really cool. And I see what you meant with demo tapes, that a lot of people would have been ignored, but it's quite interesting how you were picked up on one of the first tries, and that's really, really cool. So you play guitar, but do you play any other instruments?
Not really. I can play the drums to a degree. I can play the bass. If you can play the guitar, you can play the bass.
Oh yeah.
So I can't play piano or anything like that. I'm not classically trained. I've never had a lesson on any instrument in my life, and I don't really know what the chords I'm playing are. I wouldn't be able to name any of them, and everything I play is, I don't know if you understand this, is everything is down in drop D, where I drop the E string down to D, and I don't know the notes of anything I play. I can't play covers. I can't play other people's songs. I can only play our own songs.
So
So that's it. Yeah, I don't really have a command of the guitar either. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it at all. Like, I don't sit down and practice guitar. I do everything just to get by, just to make just to get by. But like, but over the years, I haven't played with the band and worked in studios and making records where you have to play things over and over and over and over again. It makes you good at what you do. So I'm quite limited in what I can do, but what I'm limited in what I can do it very, very well.
That's really, really cool, actually. And you were saying there about drop D. I never knew that. So all your songs are drop D on just the E string, or every single string?
Just the string. You just take the E string and drop it down to D, and then you can literally play. You can just literally play notes with one finger, all the way up and down the fretboard. And I don't know if you've ever tried it. You should try it out. It'll change everything for you.
I have an acoustic and electric. I either have the acoustic drop down fully with all the strings, or one of the strings is dropped down, and one is just the normal tuning. I love dropping D on the E, and I love when you drop the whole guitar down. It gives a whole different sound. So obviously you're an alternative band with Kerbdog. So I wanted to ask, what music inspired you musically growing up? What music did you listen to? Was it siblings that helped influence you musically with different songs and albums and bands?
And that wouldn't have been siblings, because my brothers and sisters were all a lot older than me, 10 years plus. So they were they'd even left the house by the time. So by the time I'd reached the age of 10 years old, they were gone off doing their lives. So it was more friends, other people's albums, friends of mine who are quite a big influence on me. And so I'd listen to their records, and then I got into buying my own records. And it was very alternative. It was very indie. We didn't like mainstream music. We didn't like music that was in the charts. We all thought we were too cool for that kind of stuff. And so it was underground music that we used to listen to, a bit like, stuff like Fugazi, for instance, and bands like Sonic Youth. I don't know if you know these bands because you're very young.
I do know Sonic Youth, and I know Fugazi. Sonic Youth, they've actually got a new album out called In Out In.
Yeah, well, there you go. That kind of music. And that's the kind of stuff, like, a lot of that underground music was very instrumental in the type of sound that we were looking for. But even though we were trying to do what we did, we were trying to take all those elements but put them back into the mainstream, really.
Yeah, actually, I really like that story. And I think at the time when you were growing up, a lot of people weren't into the underground music. A lot of people grew up with the Beatles and rock music, and that's what influenced them. But I think it's very interesting that you listened to that kind of music when you were growing up. So you were talking about earlier where you were saying you got signed with a record deal for Universal. So what happened after that? How did your journey into the music industry go after that?
Well, for us, we felt like we'd won the lottery. Like, I was only 19 years old when we got a record deal. So, like, I know you're 11, but like, even when you're 19, you're still fairly inexperienced in, living in the world, So it was quite a shock to the system. We moved to London, all of us, and we started rehearsing. And then quite quickly, we went into this fabulous studio. There was a lot of money around back then because record companies were very, very wealthy because they were selling CDs, and CDs were making huge profits. So there's lots of money to give bands like us, small bands, to go off to these, these luxurious residential recording studios out in the country. And we did that pretty much straight away. a place called Rockfield Studios, and we recorded our first album there. And then you'd release singles, and they'd get reviewed. Then you go on tour. You go on tour with other bands. You generally be a support band when you're a small band like us. So we toured with bands like Therapy, you might remember them, and various other
brilliant.
American bands that we would have toured around Europe and the UK with, and stuff like that. And then that it gets to the end of a cycle, and that first album did reasonably okay and set us up for the second album. We went on then we spent nearly 6 months in Los Angeles in America doing our second album, which was an experience in itself, because we were there for so long, because we were only meant to be there for about 6 weeks, but it ended up being 6 months, because we had to learn on the job, and we weren't really good enough for the guy who was making the album. He thought we needed to get better and better, so we had to practice a lot while we were over there, and he wasn't taking anything less than perfect, so it took a lot longer to make than we thought it would. Nevertheless, we had a brilliant experience. We were in California and soaking that up as young men, and generally sort of living the dream while all our friends were at home, working in jobs, and just getting into the normal rat race of life. We kind of sidestepped that for a while, and it was a glorious time in our life, and we made what we thought was a pretty fantastic record as well, called On the Turn. It was.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with On the Turn, actually. I really like that album. And when you recorded your albums, was it easier or more difficult than you thought?
More difficult, actually, because especially the second one, because we're not accomplished musicians, as I said. We kind of have a punk rock ethic, whereby once the song sounds reasonably in shape, we're happy with that. But when you bring it into a recording studio and you have producers who are paid large amounts of money to get the best out of you, they really squeeze you to work to the highest of your ability that you possibly can. So it is much harder than you think, because things kind of have to be nearly pretty much perfect. Well, it was in our case anyway, and we were not perfect. We were not perfectionists at all. So the records consequently were hard enough to make for us, to be quite honest. And it was quite hard to replicate that kind of live, because it wasn't something we did. We didn't go and practice 8 hours a day. It wasn't just something we did. Good was always good enough, but when it came to actually getting into a studio, that standard wasn't acceptable to people who were making our records with us. So making records was harder than we thought it'd be.
So it must be then a tough ride making an album. So when you are writing your songs, where do you get your inspiration from?
Everywhere, really. A lot of it's other people's music and fragments of music that goes into your head, and probably comes out in a different way. Television, I'd hear things on television, and they give me an idea for a song, or even a theme tune, or a bit of classical music. And then you just sit down with the guitar, and I generally just sit there with the guitar and mess about until I found something that I found interesting, and I'd work on that and expand it out. And generally, the way we worked, we'd have a whole song without any voice record. I could play the whole song from start to finish without any vocals. The vocals would always come at the very end. So the song would even exist in its entirety in instrumental form before vocals would even be considered. So that's just the way it kind of came together. I would generally write the music, and the boys we'd all collaborate then to put it all together.
Oh, wow, it's cool the way your songs come together, that they kind of link together with all the different instruments and tracks that you put in to make the song. So who or what musicians inspire you today? And are there any musicians that you think people should look out for?
Now, as in today's music?
Yes, currently.
Yeah, there is.
It doesn't have to be modern. I mean, at the moment, are there any people that you're listening to
Yeah.
from any time frame that you think are good?
Yeah, well, God, Logan, there's so much music, that's been made, rock and roll, certainly since the Beatles, anyway, all the way up to now. But like stuff that I would listen to quite a lot, like for instance, a band that I'm listening to right now, even though they're not particularly new, I'm only discovering all their music, is Death Cab for Cutie. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but an American band, Fugazi. Fugazi are one of the most important bands in my life, and they're a huge influence on me. Sonic Youth again, equally, but more contemporary bands that are going around at the moment. I like stuff like, I don't know if you know Foals, or stuff like The National. I like The National quite a lot. And then there'd be other kinds of music that like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I don't know if you know Nick Cave.
Yeah, I know Nick
that
Cave.
that kind of stuff that you wouldn't find that sound in our music, but it's certainly stuff that I would listen to a lot. I tend to listen to the same stuff a lot over and over and over again. So I'll get into a phase of listening to a band and I won't listen to any other band for about 6 months. So that band is Death Cab for Cutie for me at the moment.
I can see where you're coming from with kind of like, I go through phases with music. There's like one band that I latch onto for a bit, and then I see another band and I'm like, oh, they're amazing, and I'll go on to them. Then at the moment it's Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Pink Floyd at the moment.
Yeah.
And David Bowie, who I think are like, they've got some really long and mad songs. Pink Floyd, like 25 minutes, some of them, but amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Really weird stuff, like The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, mad stuff on that. But
yeah,
then,
I only discovered Pink Floyd in the last few years myself, and I'm a lot older than you. So there's never a bad time to discover music. Just because something happened, 40, 50, 30 years ago doesn't mean it's not worthy of listening to now. So I'm heartened by the fact that you as an 11-year-old are discovering Pink Floyd, because I did a lot later in life. You're discovering Pink Floyd a lot, not many 11-year-olds are into Pink Floyd. And I think that's so cool. That's really something else.
It really is fun though to be able to listen to these bands and go, oh yeah, I know them, because now at the moment, currently, Pink Floyd's debut album is 64 years old.
Wow.
I think because it's 2023 now, and 64 years old, and it was 1969 when it was released. Dark Side of the Moon is 50 years old this year.
Yeah, I know.
So there's mad facts like that. So you have your show anyways on 2FM called The Battle Axe. Brilliant name. Like, really brilliant name. So how do you decide what music to share on The Battle Axe?
Well, it's mainly mainly contemporary music. It used to be all about the battle axe. An axe is what people sometimes call a guitar, and so it was all guitar music at one point. But it's changed a lot since over the years. Now it's a very contemporary show, where it's a mixture of dance, indie music, and rock music. So most of the stuff I play on it now is the kind of guitarier end of dance music, like a lot, there's dance music out there that sounds a bit like rock music and contemporary rock music, and like bands like Folds, who I was talking about, or this dance stuff like Disclosure, or Bicep, a bunch of guys from Northern Ireland. So it's quite a mix now what I do, but it's most of it's actually quite new music, so which is great, because if I didn't have a show to play new music, I'd probably still be just listening to the stuff that I always liked and never moved on. But since I have a show that requires me to keep moving forward, that's a great motivator for me to stay on top of things and discover new stuff all the time.
Yeah, wow, that's such kind of an upbeat response to that question. Wow, that's really, really interesting. Thank you. And now for my last question, I want to ask, do you have any tips for young Irish musicians or DJs or broadcasters or people who are getting into journalism? all ages, do you have any kind of tips that you would give from your experience in the radio industry?
I would just, I suppose, if you just don't fake it, because if you like it, if you enjoy what you're doing, don't do anything to be famous. I would suggest, if you become famous through doing something that you love, that's good. But so if you become a musician, you become famous as a result of that, that's great. If you become a journalist and you become a TV journalist or a radio journalist or whatever, or TV radio presenter on certain things, that's great. But you have to have a passion for something. Like me, I have a passion for music. I have a passion for other things in life as well. But the strongest advice I would give anything is, don't do anything because you think it's going to make you popular, or who needs, fame is a kind of a very fickle thing, and it comes and goes very quickly. But if you have something passionate that you can make interesting, and you can bring your love of that, say if it's music or whatever you're into, and make that your job. If your passion can become your job, then you're doing very well. And if money and fame comes along as a byproduct of that, that's all well and good. But I would see the fame and money as a bonus. But my main advice would be is just be authentic, and if you're into something, follow it. If you don't pretend to like something just for the sake of trying to get into the media or trying to sell records and stuff like that. Long term, that's not a good strategy for happiness.
That's amazing, and it's very much true, because you really shouldn't put yourself into an industry where you don't like.
No, don't do it, because you'll spend the rest of your life regretting it.
You will, and I think that's a very, very good point. Well, thank you, Cormac, for joining me on my podcast.
You're welcome, sir.
I really, really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And for those who want to look at what you've done, and if they want to find you on social media, where can they find you, Cormac?
Well, generally, I don't engage heavily on social media, but I do have a Twitter account at Cormac Battle on Twitter, and you can find me in my band, Kerbdog, and then you can also find me doing a music show on 2FM, RT2FM. Yeah, you can find us. You can search all that stuff on the internet anyway these days.
Yeah, you really can.
You can. Logan, it's been I've never been interviewed by somebody of your age, but I can only imagine. You can tell that you are into this, and my gut says that this is we're going to be hearing an awful lot more about you in a much wider way in the future.
Thanks, Cormac. I really enjoyed talking to you too. Well, you've answered all these brilliantly, so I have to say goodbye. Bye, Cormac.
That's okay. All right, take it easy, my friend.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Logan Sounds Off. You can follow me on X, Facebook and Instagram at Logan Sounds Off. And don't forget to subscribe and not miss any more cool episodes. Bye, guys.